Crypto feels quiet right now. Not exploding, not crashing. A lot of people see that and assume that the opportunity is entirely gone. But while most people are watching price, something much bigger is shifting underneath the surface. For the first time, the United States is building rules for crypto instead of trying to shut it down. Bitcoin has locked in a role that institutions now agree on, and one layer of this market is absorbing real financial activity that most people are still ignoring. My name is Danylo, and today we're breaking down why Bitcoin is no longer being treated like a trade, why institutions are only focused on a very small piece of this market, and why the real adoption story in crypto right now looks nothing like what most people are paying attention to. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss future crypto updates. Alright? Let's get into it. For most of crypto's history, the relationship with the United States was simple. Builders built, traders traded, and regulators tried to shut it all down after the fact. You had lawsuits, enforcement actions, vague threats, and years of uncertainty made the entire industry feel temporary, like it could all disappear with one bad headline. That phase is ending. Good to know. Not because regulators suddenly love crypto, but because ignoring it is no longer simply an option. Stablecoins are now legally recognized. Market structure rules are moving through the system. This is no longer a fight over whether crypto should exist. It is now a debate over how it should be organized. What that actually means in real life is this. Digital dollars now have legal standing. On-chain settlement is being taken seriously, and most importantly, the idea of tokenized stocks, bonds, and funds is no longer theoretical. These are the same financial instruments people already use, just rebuilt on faster rails. This is the moment crypto stopped being treated like a rebellious side market and started being absorbed into the real financial system. Not loudly and not with the fireworks, quietly, through paperwork and through legislation. And this is where the shift begins to matter for your money. When rules exist, big capital can move. When big capital moves, behavior across the entire market changes. Suddenly, the question is no longer, is crypto real? It becomes, which parts of this system actually matter long term? For a long time, people argued about what Bitcoin was supposed to be. Digital cash? A payment system? A replacement for the dollar? That debate is basically over now. Bitcoin lost the payments race, and that is not a bad thing. Stablecoins won that fight because they move faster, feel familiar, and plug into the existing financial system without any of the friction. What Bitcoin became instead is something much more durable. It is now being treated as a reserve asset, a hedge against monetary risk, a digital version of gold that you can move instantly across the entire world. This is not how retail traders think about Bitcoin just yet, but it is exactly how institutions are starting to treat it. Here is where most people are still misaligned. They trade Bitcoin like a momentum coin in a market where big money is treating it like a long-term savings layer. Bitcoin is sitting around a $1.8 trillion market cap instead of a total crypto market cap closer to $3 trillion. This is not peak mania. This is just quiet positioning. If Bitcoin is now a reserve asset, then flipping it like a meme coin is the wrong mental model. That does not mean no volatility. It simply means the roles have changed. The expectations should change with it. Bitcoin is no longer fighting the financial system. It's being absorbed into it. And once that does click, the next question becomes quite obvious, I think. If Bitcoin is the reserve, what is the core infrastructure underneath everything else? Institutions do not think about crypto the way most retail traders do. They're not hunting narratives, and they're not chasing 10 different themes at once with all these different meme coins. They care about exposure, liquidity, and risk that they can actually justify on the balance sheet. When you zoom out through that lens, the entire market compresses very quickly. To capture most of crypto's long-term movement and risk, institutions only need two assets, Bitcoin and Ethereum. That is it. Everything else becomes optional, speculative, or dependent on those two foundations. This creates a brutal mismatch in how portfolios are built. Most retail investors are spread across 10 or 20 different tokens, hoping just one of them becomes the next breakout. Institutions move in the opposite direction. They concentrate into infrastructure and let everything else fight for relevance on top of it. This does not mean every altcoin will die. It means survival now requires real usage, real liquidity, and real dependence on the core layers. Hype alone cannot carry an asset through an institutional cycle. If the largest pools of capital do not need your asset to gain exposure to crypto, then that asset lives and dies on speculation. And speculation dries up fast when the markets mature. Once that reality truly sets in, the entire conversation shifts. Bitcoin becomes reserve, Ethereum becomes the base, Everything else has to prove why it deserves to exist at all. For a lot of people, Ethereum still just feels like another coin, something you trade, something that moves with the entire market. But its real role is much bigger than that. Ethereum is the base settlement layer of crypto finance. It is the ground that everything else is being built on. Apps, protocols, and layer 2s can scale activity and lower fees. They can make the user experience smoother, but none of that changes who actually owns the foundation. Every time something meaningful happens on crypto rails at scale, it still routes back to the Ethereum's ecosystem. This is where the landlord relationship matters. The apps in layer 2s are the tenants. They grow because Ethereum exists. As usage increases, Ethereum captures value by simply being the base that everything depends on. It does not need to win every headline. It just needs more activity running through it. That is why Ethereum's growth does not always look like a clean pump. It looks slow. It looks even boring sometimes. It looks like infrastructure quietly hardening while everything else fights for attention on the surface. If Ethereum succeeds at what it is trying to become, it will not feel like a huge cycle. It'll feel like a financial migration that only becomes obvious after it already is underway. But hey, global finance and everyday finance do not move the same way. For years, Solana has been framed as a challenger, faster than Ethereum, cheaper than Ethereum, the next version of Ethereum. That comparison misses the whole point. Solana is not competing for the same job. Solana's real edge is its speed, cost, and user experience. It is built for everyday movement of money. Small transactions, mobile wallets, quick payments. The kind of activity people actually do dozens of times per day, and not just a few times a year. This is why so much activity on Solana feels a little different. It looks less like finance and more like your apps on the phone. You open your phone, you send value instantly, you trade, pay, or move money without it feeling heavy or expensive. That is not global settlement behavior, that is consumer behavior. Ethereum moves institutions and large pools of capital. Solana moves people. One is about stability and scale. The other is about speed and flow. They are not trying to win the same race, even if they exist in the same market. When you look at it this way, Solana stops looking like an Ethereum replacement and starts looking like the everyday transaction layer for crypto. And that sets the stage for the real adoption story that most people still misunderstand. When most people think about crypto adoption, they still picture NFTs, meme coins, or trading apps. But the biggest real-world use case of crypto right now is actually none of that. It is stablecoins, digital dollars that move instantly, 24/7 across borders without needing a bank in the middle. Stablecoins quietly solved the one problem crypto always struggled with, price instability. Once people could move value with something that stays pegged to the dollar, everything changed. Payments all of a sudden became practical. Payroll became possible. Cross-border transfers became cheap and fast instead of slow and expensive. This is also why Bitcoin stopped being treated as a payment tool. Stablecoins simply stole the job, but in doing so, they made crypto unavoidable as financial infrastructure. Banks, fintech apps, traders, and even governments now have to deal with on-chain dollars as a real part of the system. Here is the behavior shift most people are missing. Retail still chases volatility because that is where the excitement truly is. Institutions are building the pipes that volatility flows through. Payment rails, settlement layers, treasury-backed liquidity that never truly sleeps. Stablecoins are not the loudest part of crypto. They're the most useful part though. And once you see where the real utility lives, the rest of the market starts to look very different. Once money can move on chain, it does not stop there. The next thing that follows is everything money touches. You have stocks, bonds, funds, yield. All the instruments people already use in traditional finance are starting to migrate onto faster rails. Tokenization sounds abstract until you translate to what it actually changes. Settlement moves from days to minutes. Ownership becomes programmable. Access becomes global by default instead of locked behind borders and institutions. The same assets still exist, but the way they move completely changes. This is why so much of the real infrastructure work in crypto looks boring from the outside. It's all the legal frameworks, custody, and all the compliance, transfer rails, the work that really nobody wants to trade on headlines, but everybody ends up using once it's finished. Most people think adoption looks like a viral app. In finance, adoption usually looks like plumbing. Once it is installed, nobody talks about it. They just expect it to work faster and cheaper than before. And this is where the earlier pieces start to connect. Bitcoin as a reserve, Ethereum as a settlement base, Solana as a transaction rail, stablecoins as money. Tokenization is where all this ties together into one continuous system instead of a collection of disconnected narratives. Crypto does not feel explosive right now, and that is exactly why this moment matters. The loud phases of this market are easy to spot. The quiet phases are where the system actually gets rebuilt. The last cycle was about proving crypto could exist. This phase is about deciding what parts of it actually matter. Bitcoin is settling into its role as the reserve currency. Ethereum is hardening into financial infrastructure. Solana is finding its place in everyday movement. Stablecoins are becoming the money layer. Tokenization is pulling traditional assets onto faster rails. None of this happens with fireworks. It happens really slowly through all the usage, regulation, and behavior shifts that most people do not notice until the results are already locked in. So here is the real question. If the system is changing right now, quietly and even structurally, are you positioned for the market that is being built or the one that already passed? Let me know down in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring notification bell so you never miss future crypto updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.